voice is becoming like the new mobile, right? Rewind a few years ago, I had to have a web interface so people could experience my brand behind a login. I had to have a mobile app. And my personal theory is that voice enablement, the idea of a persona that I can speak to with voice, is becoming the new interface in which I want to speak to a brand or a solution. So we're seeing a lot of customers come to us and say, hey, chatbots are great, but they're clunky. People feel like they're doing online customer support. What if they could click a button and just start having a voice conversation in the way some people are using ChatGPT? And so I think this will be super popular.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St.Pierre and Rich Hoffmann.
Entrepreneurs, we're welcoming Ben Johnson to the podcast today. Ben is the founder and CEO of Particle 41. It's a full outsourced team of CIO level services, CTO level services for your company, helping increase business value, which, Ben, that got my attention. I want to increase business value. As you guys work with companies today, what is the most common areas that your company can immediately impact and increase business value?
Yeah, to sum that up in a one-liner, getting full potential out of your data. We're seeing, of course, everybody's talking about AI. It's the topic we talk about often, but maybe you're getting a little tired of. And that is, even if you've done a digital transformation recently, you're going, hey, man, I need to figure out if I have the data to do AI solutions. And that'd be how I'd sum that up.
Yeah, I love that. This may be somewhat controversial. I'm curious as to where you'd sit on this, but yes, there's a lot of buzz around AI. And then when we talk about getting the full potential of the data was already there. And some companies don't even look at the data they have. And then the AI comes around. Oh, we have AI now. We should look at our data. You could have looked at your data before AI. Why weren't you doing that? So I have to believe that when you work with companies, although AI is the buzzword, the initial stages have to be like, what data do you have? And how are you tracking your data? And how's your data cleaned up so we can deploy it in other tools? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, let me be a little bit verbose there. We have an AI transformation strategy that has 3 parts. And the first part is usually around training. How am I going to give access to ChatGPT to my employees? How am I going to encourage them to experiment? And so strategy 1 is let's train and let's experiment and let's identify use cases. Strategy 2 is then how do we augment our processes and implement AI in our workflows? So how do we create small automations? The third tier, or the third strategy, is the agentic strategy. And the agentic strategy is all about having a persona that acts like a human and we can delegate a role to it. But you can imagine if you want to delegate a role to an artificial intelligence, you need the data to support what decisions it's going to make and what information it's going to be able to share. So I think that in that third tier, that agentic strategy, it's pulling people into data lakehouse architecture. You may have the data, but it might be in umpteen different systems. And so you need to consolidate that data so that it's available to your new agentic workforce.
Love that. And I think when you talk about increasing business value, and I've done this in my own companies and I've just been amazed by it, which is it's creating operational capacity is what I've seen being like the big win for me. It's not sales and marketing. Like AI came out at first. It can do your content for you and your LinkedIn posts for you, and it can do all these other things. And yeah, it was exciting. And I thought that's where the opportunity was. And when I dug deeper, I was like, wait a minute. I can actually increase the capacity of my operations team by providing them better data and tools that will increase our margins and our profitability and our value. And that get my eyes this big, Ben. I was like, oh my gosh, we got to do this faster. Is that a correct way of looking at it?
I think so. I think there's a dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. And so if your team, a lot of times what we see when we do the strategy 1, the AI training, is that as they start to explore, our teammates start to repeat themselves. Probably many folks have grabbed a transcript from their note taker and put it into the AI and then done something and then taken that output and done something else with it, put it in a PowerPoint presentation, or we've all kind of done that to expand our capacity. Now the idea is okay, if I'm repeating myself, but I'm the human doing all this orchestration, I'm grabbing data, I'm putting it into the LLM, I'm getting some result. Let's find those use cases that can then be automated. And that gets us into strategy 2.
Tell me about the use cases that you would take off of transcripts and then turn into automating.
I'll give you a different example. So I use the transcripts all the time if I have a really great conversation and I want to turn that into a presentation, or I want to turn that into a follow-up, maybe a project plan, all kinds of things I'm doing with transcripts. I'm even opening up a meeting and recording myself, right? So that's endless. But I'll give you an example of how we've used AI in our organization. So when we open up a role for a professional, say a data engineer, we get 500 applications a week. There's no way we could hire a human to give equal measure to each of those applicants. So we have an AI, and that AI's job is to grab the resume from the applicant, compare it to the job description, give us a score, explain the score, and then fill in a bunch of things on the employee profile that we need anyway. What's their location? Anything we can determine, anything that the human would have determined by looking at the resume, we want to get that in fields and values on the application in our application tracking system. So now we've given every applicant an equal scan or an equal assessment of how well they fit the job description. And then the human, the recruiter involved, can read the explanation for the score. For example, we want to hire a cloud-based data engineer. If a 20-year SAP data engineer applies for the same job, they're going to score lower because their experience is not relevant to the job that we're hiring for. And so that's a great way for us to make sure that everything's taken a look at. Then the people who score high, they're a match for the job. We send them an AI-based assessment, an assessment that monitors for cheating or a lot of moving outside of the browser to answer some basic coding questions. So once that assessment stage is in, then we spend the time to do the interview. So we're only spending time on the highest value candidates. That's just a simple application that's in that strategy 2 category of an automation, right? There's still a human in the loop. We're still looking at those high value targets, but to your point, that's made them more efficient, right? It's expanded their capacity and floated the value to the top.
So when we look at that as an automation, and that's in your level 2, if we look at level 3, then tell me about if someone wanted to use Agentic AI in the next phase of that selection process. How would they go about doing that, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so in that particular example, in their recruiting example, there are people who are doing AI-based interviews. So you're like getting on an interview and you're talking to a digital persona and they're asking you questions and you're answering them. I'm not sure I'll go there. There's like probably applications I would apply Agentic to or not apply. A great example of an Agentic implementation is first-tier customer support. So the data that I need is all my FAQs. Maybe I do some training where I go through all the Q&A emails that I've answered over the last couple of years, and I turn that into a data asset that's available to a persona, an agent, and I give that personality. Maybe I name it in line with my brand. And now when people go onto my website and they're chatting, or even when they call in, the IVR is talking to that agent to return responses to common questions. If a question comes up the agent doesn't understand, it's trained to say, okay, now I'm going to direct you to a human agent. And another example of this is speed to lead. So we have some small business clients, and a customer, maybe it's like I'll use a catering metaphor. So I just want to know if you have the offering for my catering, for my wedding that I want to have. I want to know when I can come see the venue. So it's just going to answer those upfront sales questions and then book the time that fits into the calendar so that you're closing the sale. So these are some examples of what I mean by an agent. The role or responsibility that we assign the agent could start out really limited because we may not have enough data to make that role really big. But I can start to delegate a role or responsibility to the agent. I just have to make sure that's not alienating my customer experience. And what we've seen in like the catering example is it really doesn't. In fact, some people show up and, hey, Carl was great. He was super responsive and answered all my questions. And we're like, yeah, we love Carl.
What are the options with agentic AI of how a customer could interact with it? For example, a chat bot that's loaded up with the data. I assume that would be an example of it. What are other examples of the use of agentic AI, and what are you finding are the most appealing examples to people?
Yeah, without stealing some thunder from some of my clients, what I'll tell you in more of a generality here is that voice is becoming like the new mobile, right? Rewind a few years ago, I had to have a web interface so people could experience my brand behind a login. I had to have a mobile app. And my personal theory is that voice enablement, the idea of a persona that I can speak to with voice, is becoming the new interface in which I want to speak to a brand or a solution. So we're seeing a lot of customers come to us and say, hey, chatbots are great, but they're clunky. People feel like they're doing online customer support. What if they could click a button and just start having a voice conversation in the way some people are using ChatGPT? And so I think this will be super popular. I think if your brand doesn't have a voice agent, so you start out with the chatbot agent, you test it out, you make sure it has all the good data and it's answering all the common use cases that customers are coming to it for, and then you voice enable it. And I think that's going to be more and more common, that folks are going to want to experience a conversational interface with your brand.
And if somebody wanted to interact with agentic AI for your company and get a sample of that and a sample of what you do, how would they go about doing that?
We are very much a services company. And that's why I didn't answer your question directly, because I want to protect my customers' ideas. And so, yeah, we love to help with those creative ideas, and we can show you what we've done for other folks. But it is a larger process than what people expect. The loading of the data, the training, the understanding of the use cases. There's quite a bit of business consulting that goes into it. It's not just, hey, I want what's happening for a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners is I just want more of the AI, right? They're being told they need to have it to compete. There's a fear of falling behind. And so we want to dig below that and figure out, okay, what is actually going to generate ROI? Because in the AI world, you're talking about data expertise. You're talking about AI expertise. You're talking about cost benefit analysis on the amount of credits you're going to spend on an agentic solution. So it's not for the faint of heart here. It's not just magic AI fairy dust. It really is an additional layer of transformation. It's not just, I need more of the AI. It's okay, how is more of the AI actually going to drive you forward? And I think more and more we're seeing where AI is applied, but it isn't necessarily helping the customer experience. And so, yeah, it needs some thought.
Ben, that's where you were going there is where I've experienced it, which is the excitement of AI got me to look into our companies and go, hey, what could we automate and what do we need to do here? And you know what the funny part was? The first automation we did had nothing to do with AI. It was all APIs between Salesforce.com and Ramp and different technologies that already existed. We just never really evaluated. And so AI got the buzz going. But then when we actually created something that was working in terms of a workflow, we realized the workflow wasn't even AI. There was no AI bots working. It was just actually the technology already existed. The APIs already existed. And so I love where you went with the business consulting side of it, because there are a lot of processes that get born into companies, and over the years, they just become the norm. And we got to be looking at those, how more efficient we can make those processes become. And sometimes it is AI, sometimes it's just business consulting. And here, how your flows should work with your technology. I'm curious, either personally or with your companies, what are some of the top software tools you're seeing today that companies are really deploying to use automations and workflows? For example, like I've used N8N in our company, right? That's been big. We use AI to help us program N8N, but we use N8N's one that I think seems to be pretty strong. It used to be, Zapier's been around for a long time. doing API stuff like I was talking about. What are some other tools you're seeing out there that have intrigued you?
Certainly those tools are great. If I could go back just a step there, the same thing was happening when we got really good. I have a online advertising background. And so a lot of things were the buzz several years ago was predictive analytics. And then you'd go in to solve a predictive analytics and you realize a statistical analysis will get us really far. If we just figured out how the average of the past 3 months, we could create a really good budget. We really don't need a fancy machine learning model. And so to your point, like sometimes this process of how could we leverage AI more just brings you back into an automation discussion and you realize, hey, these things just need to be connected. So I wanted to affirm your point there because we're very much seeing that. The tool front is a wild space. New tools all the time. We actually created a periodic table of business tools, and now we've had to start thinking about a periodic table of AI tools because they're competing with one another and a new one seems to be popping up. You mentioned a great one. Innate is a really cool idea. And I've never been a huge fan of Zapier. That's not to kibosh on that. I seem to hit the limits of Zapier, but those limits are opened up when we think about NAN and we can have APIs mixed with custom code. What I think is really interesting in the same vein is this low code, no code model has been around a while. And so folks buy Salesforce and NetSuite, and this low code, no code thing seems to pull them into these types of products. What we've seen in the maturity of those is then you have whatever that low code, no code solution, you have experts that understand that. So you have this Salesforce administrator on staff, or a Mendix is another one. You have an expert there, and you have a licensing cost. So we're a little bit on a purist around custom solutions and custom code because the cloud platforms are helping us to manage those. There's DevOps tooling that helps us manage the automation and deployment. That's not to say that's right for the small business who's just trying to connect their Calendly with their HubSpot, right? Zapier is great for that. But just something for business owners to consider is that if you're in the world of custom, you're only limited by your creativity and the team that you build and the partners that you use to build exactly what you're designing and exactly what you want to create. When you move into a low code, no code solution or a COTS solution, you're having to learn that thing and understand its boundaries. And so it's just a different skill. It's like your skill is really in the partnering with that particular platform rather than the innovation or the building of proprietary code that you get to create.
Gotcha. By the way, any chance you would share that periodic table with our audience? Yeah, I love
Sure,
the
yeah.
of
Be
those
happy to,
tables.
yeah.
Yeah. So entrepreneurs listening to this and they're like, okay, great. I know I need to do more here. What should they do before even engaging a company like yours? What is a couple of things you might consider them to do in their own businesses to seek out opportunities to maximize their value?
So just be really clear about the challenge, like the problem, the challenge that you're trying to solve. I find that if folks are really clear on their standard operating procedure, then they can approach IT, software developers, partners like us with a really clear, okay, this is the process we're executing today. These are the KPIs around that process. For example, when I told you about our recruiting problem, I mentioned that there were X number of applications per week, 500 plus applications per week. So now when I'm going to invest in a workflow or a solution or trying to solve that challenge, I know what I'm doing it for. So it's not just more of the AI so I can tell people I have more of the AI. And there's actually a problem because we need to have an ROI calculation. And maybe this is the CTO in me coming out here. We need to have an ROI in mind. We need to know the cost of the manual procedure because in the AI world, we're going to exchange cost for credits. And I'm seeing a lot of people going, oh, I need more of the AI. And then all of a sudden they see the bill on the credits and like, wait a minute, I'm actually going to spend more money to do it in an automated or automatic way than I was doing it the same way before. So we want to be really clear about the problem we're actually trying to solve. And so it goes back to the basics. Like, what's the process? If you had to do it manually, how are you going to do it? And having a mature business and then automating, then making it more enhanced is going to be a great way so that you go to your vendors or go to your partners with a really clear target.
For the potential customers who engage with you, but they ultimately do not become a customer, not because it's judgment on you, but because they're not ready for whatever reason. What are some reasons somebody doesn't engage?
So we have business consulting exactly for that. That's why I offer fractional CTO services, and I have some other folks that will be like your product consultant. So business consultants offer a really great role in what we do because we can talk you through that. We can help you determine those processors. We can help you with that discovery and that documentation. So I think that's where some work is. In my career, I've never found that writing code or creating the infrastructure was where the barrier was. It was around the identification of the problem and really knowing what outcome you want to hit. Once we understand the outcome, then we come alive. So some folks are just not ready or clear. I think it's a clarity issue around the problems that they need to solve. And even if they directionally know that they think there's a problem somewhere over there, like, we can help get clear and identify that. So to answer your question, I think it just starts with a degree of clarity and understanding of your business mechanics. And then improvements can always be made. If we can address what we're trying to do, we can always find an improvement to be made.
What are you seeing in the world of AI that is a really good idea, but it's not quite ready yet? It's not quite there to the quality level it needs to be.
That's tricky. I do think that's tricky because given more context and given more guardrails, if there's a will, there's a way. It's just more in when the data is not quite there, so we're trying to make stuff up. For example, if we're helping somebody solve customer support problems with AI, and they want to ask the AI questions like, if I improve this problem, what would be the outcome to my bottom line? But we haven't ever told the AI about our P&L or certain constraints. And of course, it's just going to make that up. If we ask AI, hey, I'm in Texas, so is Whataburger or In-N-Out Burger the healthier option? It's going to tell me that's a really dumb question. Right? Neither of those are very healthy. And it's just going to try to figure out based on something which one is better. And so I think the responsibility is still with the operator.
When you talk about using the data and maximizing what it can be used for, what is the type of data that the average entrepreneur should start getting if they haven't already done so?
Yeah, that's a widespread. Entrepreneurs are letting the data live inside their COTS tools, their commercial off-the-shelf software. And so when they go to these AI solutions, there's I'll be a little technical. There's a tool called RAG where it's organizing that data. And that's when I say data pipelines or bringing your data into a lake house, this is where AI can start to come alive. So as you start to explore that third strategy, you're going to start to feel like, oh, wait, actually, I have this data, but it's in all these different places. And so that's an investment. That's a maturity and a modernization effort. And so that's why it's really great to start with the use cases and then move to workflow, because the proficiency or the capacity to use your guys' word that you're going to gain from the training and the automation is going to give you budget and room to start to explore organizing your data, bringing it into a single store, start to organize it into a contextual solution like a RAG solution, and to be able to leverage it through more robust AI products. It really is going to be an evaluation process so you can decide the juice is worth the squeeze. Just doing it to do it would be costly. So it goes back to which problem do you want to solve? And where do you think an agent could start to you could really delegate some responsibility to the agent? And then this is influencing people's product development because they want to be the first AI enabled thing on the market.
If you had the attention of all entrepreneurs, literally all of them, you can't possibly work with all of them, but you can have a word with them. And what words would you give them on what everybody needs to know? What does everybody need to know? Whether they engage with you or not, you should know this.
At the risk of repeating myself, it would be going back to the basics, right? Knowing the KPIs and key performance indicators, the problem, know your business. Because many entrepreneurs are going to come talk to folks like me with open-ended problems. And that's where consulting thrives, right? Consulting makes the most money when the problem is open-ended. With AI, it's making so many things easier that I don't want entrepreneurs to get lazy and miss the basics of managing a business. Know your P&L, know what's important to your customer, and just start there. You don't have to eat the whole elephant. You just got to take a bite at a time. And so, the agile method, like the agile way of thinking, and starting to stack rank some of your challenges, that's the important thing to be doing, rather than go to consultants with the open-ended problem.
Ben, if people want more of you, how would you like them to go about getting in touch with you?
So I am super easy to connect with, but I'm cursed with a very common name. So the best way to connect with me is to go to particle41.com. I have a Calendly link right on my homepage. So you can go to particle41.com and you can click on that. I'm also around on LinkedIn, but because of my common name, it's best to go to Particle41 and then find me. And even on my LinkedIn, there's a book a meeting, set an appointment. So super easy to book 30 minutes with. And I'd love to talk to anyone who has an outcome in mind that we can help them tackle.
Thank you for joining us, Ben.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
Rich, I love the way Ben positioned the maturity and modernization effort. I think that's where a lot of small businesses are today, is they need to mature to where the business is going. But I loved how he brought it back to, you just need to know your darn numbers. You just need to know your numbers, because if you know your numbers, you know what problems you need to solve. If you know what problems you need to solve, you can go to somebody and say, here's my problem. Move this from here to here. Let's work on that effort. What do we need to do that? If you go with an open-ended, hey, I heard AI is big, I just want to get into AI, you'll be pretty disappointed with the return on investment. You don't know what you're really looking for. So what I like is the idea of getting with your team and really talking about what are the areas, the specific KPIs we're trying to improve. Are we trying to improve gross margin? Are we trying to improve our operating expenses? Are we trying to improve the efficiency of how much somebody can produce? What are we trying to improve? Let's talk about how that could happen. And let's bring those ideas forward. Let's prioritize them in the right way. And then let's go mature that area of our business and modernize it one by one. And slowly but surely, you'll start seeing tons of opportunities from that.
Did you pick up the dry method?
No.
Don't repeat yourself.
Yes.
DRY.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
And how true is that if you find yourself repeating yourself, there may be another medium to deliver that message through opposed to your live time. So through getting transcripts, if you're somebody that gets AI transcripts of meetings these days, if you find yourself repeating yourself, can you even put that in a prep email? Can you put it in Agentic AI? Is there another way to deliver the stuff so you're practicing the dry method, don't repeat yourself, and then you can have original conversation live with people who you're serving instead of repeating yourself conversation?
Yeah, I love that. No, I completely missed that one. That's a time management 101 for you personally. You see an email, deal with it. Don't just repeat it and look at it 10 times and leave it in your inbox. Dry. Don't repeat yourself. I love that. You know what? You asked a question, Rich. I'm curious about your input on this because I was thinking about when you asked. You said, what's one area of AI that quite hasn't gotten there yet? And the one that I would say is video avatar. I think it's coming at a rapid pace. We just haven't seen it yet. And he stopped, for example, when he was talking about the resumes. I love that example. You have 500 resumes. How are you using AI to scorecard those resumes? Send that person a questionnaire to fill in maybe some initial questions that aren't answered in the resume. Maybe have them do a personality test with AI, score them again. But then when we interview them, we're going to do it like face to face, person to person. It won't be too long before Ben will be able to interview hundreds of candidates at the same time with him being on video and him asking questions that Ben and only Ben would ask because that avatar is trained to all of Ben's information. That's coming soon. It's coming so soon. That's scary. But I think that is going to be when things start shifting to not only voice AI, but video and voice AI.
I experienced something just last week that was an AI limitation. Maybe it was just a chat GPT limitation, but it was a limitation for me nonetheless. I was facilitating a meeting between the owner and the CEO, and I had both of them do prep, and I had them do that prep on Microsoft Forms. I then took what their prep was of the exact same questions for Microsoft Forms, and I created a PDF for each. I then uploaded the PDF to both of them to ChatGPT, and I said, give me their answers one after the other for question one. Then give me question two and give me both of their answers. And give me question three and give me both their answers. And give me question four and give me both their answers. John, it took me probably 25 or 30 minutes of trying to massage these inadequate outputs, and it never ended up being right. It ended up taking like a screenshot, and then it did some type of script that it read it by, and hold on, I'm thinking, and it had the names in the wrong area, and then all of a sudden it had question number 2, but it didn't have the question. And then it repeated the question right before each person's response. It had no idea what I was asking for. Like, I was the only person on planet Earth that ever wanted to take 2 sets of answers and merge them to be easy to read with a question as the header. That's an example of, I don't think AI is ready for that. No, it was my idea. Nobody's marketing the idea to me. It was like, oh, here's a way. And I don't want to copy and paste that. That's silly. Let me throw that in ChatGPT. But apparently AI is not ready for that, or ChatGPT isn't anyway.
Yeah. What's interesting, I think in that case, it seems like it started going on on a weird tangent. Sometimes I've experienced that, Rich, where it's myself. It's my prompting. I try and cheat my prompt and then I don't get what I want. And I go in a tailspin because my prompting wasn't great. It doesn't sound like your situation. That happens to me a lot. But certainly when you think about ROI, that's where I spend a lot of my time thinking. And I think all entrepreneurs should be thinking about ROI. And he brought up a really interesting point. You may think you're saving one full-time role of duties and doing this, and you're just going to move it to AI, but then the cost of doing the AI may match the exact cost of that. There's a lot of things we don't know yet. I think experimentation is great. I loved what he said in terms of the AI transformation plan. Training and experiential experiences, augment processes and automations, augment them, and then agentic strategy. And in terms of training experiences, one thing I'm encouraging all companies to do, I'm trying to get this in my own companies as well, is develop focus groups. Grab one person from every department that wants to do this and get them in a group where you can bring in some challenges and some speakers to help train them and have them experiment with different things with AI. Once that starts happening, your team starts seeing all the different opportunities that could happen with AI, and they'll bring it back to the focus group and to the business, where at the end of the training, you say, how could you see this applying in our company? What are some opportunities we start seeing? And now you have more than just you, the entrepreneur, thinking about opportunities. You have your entire team thinking about it. So getting your team in AI working groups, like really thinking through and experimenting, is level 1 of the AI transformation plan. I think all companies should be doing.
Ben gave us a really good reminder on understanding the exact problem you're trying to solve. The problem you're trying to solve is not, I need to use AI more. And I think a lot of people who know they're not into it as much as they could or should be, they think the problem is that they're not using it as much as they could or should.
Yeah.
And if we can stop having the goal be, I just need to use it more, and identify what's the problem you're trying to solve, then engage AI to help solve that problem. It comes back to, John, way back in the day, 25, 30 years ago, when we got taught problem solving, And it was like, stop solving for symptoms and solve for the root problem. What's the actual problem you're trying to solve? And if you solved that, does that actually solve the problem? Or does the problem still persist? So I think really getting clarity on what's the problem you're trying to solve, then giving AI a try instead of just going and try to engage AI more because you know you should.
Yeah. And when you do improve something, measure it. And how much did you improve it? Look back on what you're improving to see if you actually got that ROI. I think plays a big piece. And I hope you, the listener, got ROI from listening to this podcast with Ben Johnson, and look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks for joining the Entrepreneurs United podcast.